Hello and welcome back to Time Out for Trade. I'm Macy Oplinsky, and on this episode, I'm welcoming on Amy Magnus, Director of Customs Affairs and Compliance, and Sandy Coty, Director of Operational Development here at Deringer, as they discuss the recent executive order on reciprocal tariff rates and what it means for U.S. trade policy. The executive order is available in the description box if you'd like to reference it throughout this episode. Without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Amy and Sandy.
Well, welcome everybody. My name is Amy Magnus, and I have with me today Sandy Coty, and we are both here to try to describe to the best of our ability this new executive order, which was signed on July 31st. And I really shouldn't say that it's, quote, new, unquote. It actually is a modification of an executive order that was issued. It's Executive Order 14257, and that was issued back on April 2nd. And what we're dealing with here are the reciprocal tariff rates for broken down by countries. So we'll talk about this in more detail in a second, but the executive order modifies the original 14257 executive order. And there's also a CSMS message, which we've referred to here, CSMS 658-29726, which further tries to clarify the executive order, because I can tell you there's some confusing things in this executive order. But basically, the way it works in this case is there are two annexes to this order. Annex 1, and I'd like to kind of have this in front of me now. Annex 1 lists a bunch of countries, and it tells us what the duty rate is, or the new IEEPA duty rate, the new negotiated or assigned duty rate for various countries. For example, the first one is Afghanistan, and that one is coming in at a 15%. And then we've got, countries like Switzerland. I think that one is at like 30-something percent. It's 39%, by the way, Switzerland. Who knew? Who would have known? So anyway, broken down by all these different countries, Zimbabwe, being the last country on the list in Annex 1, comes in at 15%. So roughly these duties are 15, 20, 30%, depending on whatever deal was worked with the particular country in mind. The important point is we now have a list of countries, and we have a list of the IEEPA reciprocal duty rate that has been assigned to that country. This executive order also contains Annex number 2. And if you're thinking of printing this, I just want to caution you in advance. Annex 2 is like 22 pages. And what Annex 2 does, it once again addresses each individual country that's listed in Annex 1 and describes what the duty rate is, and also assigns a 99 number to that specific country. So when entries are being made, the broker will refer to the 99 number and assign the IEEPA duty rate on top of the column 1 or column 2 duty rate. The IEEPA duty rate is listed by 99 numbers. So there we have it. There are a couple of things that I need to point out. And one is, if your country that you're particularly interested in is not listed in Annex 1, it wouldn't be in Annex 2 either, because that goes country by country from Annex 1. So if it's not listed, then you can assume that that country is going to be the flat 10%, which goes back to that original executive order on the IEEPA reciprocals. For example, Sandy Coty pointed out to me this morning that Australia is not on this list. So I think we can assume that, at least for the time being, Australia is going to be 10%. You should also note, though, that China is not on that list, because China has a special arrangement being worked out, probably even as we speak. And we'll learn more about that on or after August 12th of 2025. I also want you to understand that neither Canada nor Mexico are listed in this list of countries in Annex 1. And that's because Mexico already has a 25% IEEPA duty rate, and that is at this moment not going to change. And Canada was bumped up from 25 to 35% very recently, last week, in fact. So that's 35% for Canada, 25% for Mexico, and they are not part of this executive order because they each have their own executive order. So we're having a lot of fun with this, and make sure that you all understand that this could change anytime. This is what we know right now, today, and it could change tomorrow or the next day. So Sandy, maybe you could help us understand what's going on with vessel arrivals.
Yeah, so this revision to the executive order does have an in-transit provision, as it did originally, where you have to pay attention to vessel, and only vessel has been ruled. It's not a train, a plane, or a truck, right? It has to meet the vessel provision as was outlined in the CBP IEPA FAQs, another very good document for you to peruse occasionally because it gets updated. So for this reciprocal, loaded and in transit on the final mode of transit, being a vessel, before August 7th, and entered for consumption or withdrawn from warehouse for consumption before October 5th, shall not be subject to such additional duties and shall instead remain subject to the additional ad valorem duty rates previously imposed, which is the 10%. What you have to pay attention to here is Customs is currently of the opinion that a feeder vessel does not fall into the in-transit provision, and you must look at the date the goods loaded onto the mother vessel. If the mother vessel loads, in one port and then continues on to a second port, it's when it loaded onto the first port for the mother vessel destined to the United States. There's a lot of concern about this interpretation. Maybe there'll be some additional information coming our way regarding this feeder vessel quandary. All right, so the EU has a special carve out. The way it reads is that for goods of the EU with a column 1 duty rate, that's your chapter 1 through 97 duty rate, that is less than 15%. We're going to have to do some math, because if it's less than 15%, you're going to pay the chapter 1 through 97. And then there's going to be another tariff where you're going to supplement it to bring it up to 15%. So no less than 15% will be paid on goods from the EU. And that has one tariff. If the chapter 1 through 97 duty rate is at least 15%, then you only declare the chapter 1 through 97, and there's a different chapter 99 that goes at 0% that states I don't pay additional because I'm at the full, I'm at 15% or more. Software is really not going to be ready for this. Come 1 days from now, there's going to be a lot of calculating being done manually. So here's an example that they put in Annex 2. If the good is subject to a specific or compound duty rate, this is where it gets complicated when it's not a straight percentage duty rate on the value. How do you determine whether it's below or above the 15% threshold? And it gives you a little formula that they're going to say for you to follow. So the example is, if you have a specific duty rate of 50 cents per kilo and 1 kilo was entered with a customs value of $10, then what they're calling the ad valorem equivalent rate, which is translating a specific duty rate or compound rate to a straight percentage, would be obtained by dividing 50 cents by $10, yielding 5%. Therefore, in this case, you would have to do a second line for 10% duty to come up with the 15% total. So that's the special carve out for the EU.
Sandy, that's just crazy. I don't know how we're going to do it without having the software programmed, and I'm not sure how they're going to ever be able to program it. Wow.
Yeah, so it's not that hard if you're over 15% duty rate. If it's less and it's only a percentage rate, it's not really difficult. I mean, it's manual for now, but it's these compound and specific rates that are really going to be a challenge for all of us to make sure we can do it compliantly. And I'm not certain customs will have the edits in place to help us determine that we're compliantly transmitting a total of no less than 15%. All right. Brazil is also special. Brazil has its own executive order, and it's dated July 30th. There's a CSMS that accompanies it. This one's a bit different because it looks at August 6th, not August 7th. This will be an additional 40% effective August 6th. In addition to the 10% reciprocal that was in the annexes that Amy just mentioned. So you're going to end up with 299 numbers, similar to how we do with China, where you have a 301 and then a IEPA, right? But this is going to be 2 IEPAs. We're still on the technical side trying to understand which order to send those in. So it's an additional 40%. So you're paying 50%. They do not apply to products subject to 232. So that's like the unstacking. And there's a lot of exceptions that are listed in Annex 2. So Brazil, once again, a different date, 1 day earlier. It also has an on the water provision. Same things to consider, time of entry. This is something that we've been doing for the last, since 2018, right? Time of entry is critical. The vessel arrival, IT, release date all kind of dictates when your new duty rate goes into effect.
So as these go into effect, we have to pay particular attention to both the EU and Brazil, because those aren't as straightforward as the other countries that are listed in Annex 1. So thanks for calling that out. There is another sort of mystery around this EO and other EOs, by the way. This is the mystery around what we call transshipment. As normal customs brokers, which Sandy and I both are, we've often thought of transshipment as something maybe a little different than what is appearing in these executive orders. Illegal transshipment, we would have traditionally defined as, let's say, a good is actually country of origin and manufactured in China. That is shipped to, let's say, a country like Vietnam. And then the Vietnam shipment is shipped to the United States with the country of origin of Vietnam, when in fact it was actually shipped from China originally and was manufactured in China, but was falsely claimed as Vietnamese country of origin. That is the traditional transshipment that we have been used to for many years, illegal transshipment. The executive order seems to be referring to a different kind of transshipment. We're not exactly sure, and we haven't really gotten a lot of clarity on this. But what we have been told is that if CBP, if Customs and Border Protection, determines that the article was transshipped to evade the applicable duty of, let's say, a higher duty rate country transshipped to a lower duty rate country, if that kind of shenanigan is going on to claim a lower rate, then there will be an additional 40% attached, a 40% duty attached to that particular item. But there's something else a little bit more chilling about this, and that is also that there could be applicable penalties. And normally these penalties would come under something like 19 U.S.C. 1592, the fraud statute, if in fact there was a false claim of country of origin in the traditional sense of illegal transshipment. So this is a bit of a problem. Not only will you be assessed more duty, but you will also perhaps be facing some penalties. And Customs and Border Protection is the agency that's going to determine whether or not a transshipment is actually taking place. So a lot of this needs to unfold, but there is some stuff here that we all need to take note of, and that is there will be no mitigation if such a penalty is assessed. So we're talking big time enforcement here. And I think the message here is don't mess around with this. If you try to cheat and avoid or evade these particular IEPA duties that are covered in this executive order, we are going to throw the book at you. And we're going to do something else according to the executive order. And I wanted to just point this out so that people are aware of it. There's always a little bit of concern about making the names of violators publicly available. So I copied the exact language of the executive order for you to look at here. And I'll just read it briefly because there's a lot of people involved here too. The Secretary of Commerce, you've got to love how many people they've got involved. The Secretary of Commerce and the Secretary of Homeland Security, acting through the Commissioner of Customs and Border Protection, in consultation with the U.S. Trade Representative. So you've got all those parties all involved, and they will publish every 6 months a list of countries and specific facilities used in the circumvention schemes to inform public procurement, national security reviews, and commercial due diligence. So I want to go through those last 3 items to inform public procurement. In other words, possibly, and now I'm just going to throw out some thoughts, possibly if your name appears on this list for being a bad facility, a bad actor, or maybe even if your country appears on this list for being a country that is involved in evasion, then maybe there will be no public procurement for goods from your particular facility or country. Also for national security reviews. And finally, and perhaps some chilling for some of our businesses, is commercial due diligence. So that makes one opine that if a name of a facility appears on a list such as this that has been publicly published, will we now have difficulty if we are actually continuing to do business with one of those bad actors? So I'm not sure how this is all going to shake out, but I did want to bring out this particular section of this executive order. And there's another executive order that has the same language. So I just feel like at the end of the day, we're entering into not only a bunch of duties that we've never had to deal with before, but also perhaps much more rigid and strict enforcement to ensure compliance. So if you don't know what you are doing, or if you're not familiar with the rules of trade, international trade, please seek advice and get help. Because if you unknowingly commit any of these violations, I have a feeling they're going to be very serious. So know before you go. So that's it for today. I hope you found what Sandy had to tell you and what I had to tell you of use. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Amy and Sandy, and to all of you for joining us for this discussion on the recent executive order impacting reciprocal tariff rates. We hope it gave you a clearer view of what's ahead in U.S. trade policy. For more updates and resources, be sure to visit us on our website at anderinger.com. And of course, you can find us on social media on LinkedIn, X, and Facebook. Thanks for tuning in.